Hello and welcome to Healing Tips from the Heart, Intuition with Helpers, Healers, and Guides. I am your host, Dr. Lori Hops, licensed psychologist, writer, and artist. I've explored mind, body, and spirit related to intuition, or your personal guidance system, since early childhood. Meet my guests who have learned from their personal and professional lives to explore vast realms of knowing, synchronicities, and overcoming challenges. Their stories may inspire you with tools to enhance your daily living and relationships. Hello, everyone, and welcome my special guest for today, Ulf Sandström. Ulf is a therapist, educator, and co-creator of two unique organizations designed for practical body-based methods to restore emotional balance and self-regulation in the aftermath of stress and trauma. And one of them is called TTT, or Trauma Tapping Technique, and the other is F.A.S.T, First Aid Stress and Trauma. He also is part of Peaceful Heart Network, which works globally to make trauma relief tools accessible to communities affected by conflict, poverty, and adversity. He also works with an interesting array of people from different walks of life, including those who have been incarcerated, and we'll be talking more about that in a little while. But mostly he works from a place of silence, self-expression, and heartfelt and heart-connected work. And I am so happy to have you here today with us, Ulf. It's lovely to see you.
Thank you so much, and kudos to the perfect pronunciation of my name.
We only had one rehearsal.
There we go. That's life. That's what it's called.
I'd like the audience to know that I have had the pleasure of meeting you in person a couple of times briefly at the ACEP conferences, Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology. And I have been trained in the TTT approach from a colleague of ours, Kristen Holtis. And I have your book, so I am familiar somewhat, but I haven't actually seen you do your work in person. And so this is an exciting opportunity for me to learn directly from you what's new and happening with your world, and your world is so vast and interesting. But is there anything else you'd like the audience to know as we get started?
No, I think we'll just talk about it as we go along. I think that's easier.
Okay.
But it's I started out working with hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming, NLP, and I did that out of curiosity because a hypnotist cured my wife's phobia for sharks, and so I was like, I need to check this out, and so it helped me. I mean, I'm a musician. I've been a musician almost my whole life. Working actively. And so writing lots of songs, I could see the use of hypnotic language in poetry and in music and in lyrics. And also when you speak to the audience between the songs, because if you do that, you can maintain the magic instead of dropping it. And so I started using that more and more. And then I became more and more interested, invested. I started seeing clients on the side, because if you're playing music, you're not working daytime most of the days.
Yeah.
And so I just started doing that, and it kind of grew on me, because once when I played a concert, a woman came up and said, you know what, I used to see you a lot back in the days, but the last year I've spent at home. I haven't even gone out because I haven't felt well, mentally well to walk out in crowds. I saw you were playing and I thought I'd go down and I'll let you know, I feel cured. This is like therapy. And I'm like, all right, if a concert can be therapy for many, then maybe therapy is a concert for one.
That's a beautiful statement. Yes. Wow. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, it felt natural, because you might say, you know what, why why would you choose that line? Because for me, it is the same thing. If you create art, if you're in creative arts, it doesn't fill any material function. It doesn't help us reproduce or survive, but it does at the same time, because for me, art or artistic expression is the language of the soul. And psychotherapy, psyche is the soul, and therapy is the healing. So healing of the soul. So I believe it just goes together.
You're speaking my language. When I was young, I knew I wanted to do something in the healing arts, but I also loved dance. And this was a long time ago. And the field of dance therapy had really not begun, but I was starting to hear a little bit about it because I'm only two dancers away from the founder of dance therapy. So, like, my dance teacher was the dance granddaughter, the originator. So I thought about that and decided to not do that and do mental health. But art is at the heart of the soul. I completely agree. And it is about healing. And that's why we use movement and creative arts and painting and sculpting and dance, music to help people open up. And I know that you've combined that love of creative expression with the therapeutic work that you do. So maybe you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I'm a nerd for science and I'm a nerd for spirituality. So I
Okay.
believe they meet somewhere in the middle inside us. There's a soul, nobody can prove it, nobody can see it or define it, and yet everything we do with science looks at, whatever we can measure, and we can't. So it's an interesting turning point or meeting point. And so when we're not at ease, that would be called dis-ease, an imbalance in the soul can create a disease in the body that becomes physical. It lowers our immune system. It takes things down. And we even kill ourselves, because our soul doesn't bear living on this earth. And so when we do that, the meeting point becomes very important. What is it that makes us feel good or okay or even great? And so hypnosis and NLP are fantastic. They work for a lot of things, and they're totally spoken interventions. So they're all top down. If you talk Bessel van der Kolk, it's all intellectual, passing through the language center of the brain. Unless you're doing new code NLP, which is a little bit more about states and getting the body into a different state, shifting it with speed and cognition.
What was that
So
type of NLP you mentioned?
new code NLP, that's
New code. Okay.
yeah. So John Grinder created something called new code NLP, which is more about shifting state, and instead of just analyzing how we think and why we think and what we're thinking, how our thinking patterns can be changed. So, NLP is looking at how we think, not at what we think about. So NLP doesn't care about if you're depressing or if you're euphorizing. It looks at how you do it to see if someone else could do it or if you could change the process. It's not science, it's observational, an observational epistemology or hypothesis. So I looked for something that could go bottom up, that could go for the nervous system, that could relieve anxiety regardless of language. And me and Gunilla, we started out, we came to the point where we would do TTT because she had started with that together with Dr. Carl Johnson from Virginia. They had met in Rwanda and found a protocol that would work. And she found that it needed to be simplified to work in that context. For example, eye movements are not well received in the African cultural context because if you're rolling your eyes in all directions, that's also a sign of being possessed. And it just took too much attention away from the actual healing technique. So when we met, I immediately saw that the tapping would put somebody in a trance, and the trance would be a safe place. And so you're in a safe state, safe place, and you didn't speak to get there. So that's great. And so we started experimenting and teaching and looking at it, and we came to the conclusion that if we wanted to be super trauma competent, trauma safe, then we need to eliminate all speaking because any spoken thing could trigger something we don't know what it is. We need to minimize it to a first aid technique because first aid is for everyone. Anyone can do it.
Mhm.
So the trauma tapping technique is tapping like all tapping techniques, but it's not about the points or how many times we tap them or the order. It's more about how we frame it to make sure that it's safe for anyone to use by not doing certain things like speaking or affirming or setup or eye rolling and brain balancing, because those things are too much when you have a truly traumatized population. From there, we went on to framing it as a first aid technique. I went with her to Rwanda. We founded the Peaceful Heart Network, which is an organization that freely gives, teaches, and trains these techniques so that people could ease suffering and prevent violence, because we believe hurt people, like Homeboy Industries that work with gang rehabilitation in Los Angeles has as a slogan.
Yes.
And so we did this for many years. We ran into lots of different people. We ran into the book written by Dr. Ronald Rudin, who created the Havening techniques, which is a different form. He was shown tapping by Paul McKenna. And so he just couldn't wrap his brain around, why is this working? You know, I mean, there was the explanation of meridians and energy and you know, things locked in the body and the energy system. But he wanted something that would be a little bit more a hypothesis with a neurological framework at the bottom. And so he started looking at touch and healing and trauma and how is it encoded and decoded. And he wrote the book When the Past is Always Present. And so that is about how he came up with Havening techniques, which is, you know, another technique. You're stimulating the body in a different way, but it's still a bottoms-up technique. And it's, if you look at it from the first aid perspective, where we are, we just want the very minimum viable product that will help someone and not hurt them.
Yeah.
And so when we added this, and we had been doing other things as well, like breathing, breath work, head holding, TAT, you know, Tapas acupressure technique, and they're all wonderful. But with Havening, which was similar but yet different, we could now come from a Milton Erickson double bind. We want you to try two techniques, and you tell us which one works best for you. And now we're comparing two things, so we're not selling them one thing that will solve it all. It's not the snake oil to some people who are skeptical. It's rather, which one of these works best for you?
That is brilliant. So let me just slow you down just for a moment, if it's okay.
That
For
can't be
those who
done.
are unfamiliar with this, with everything that you're saying, you know, I have a front row seat to all of this stuff, so I know exactly where you're going, but I just wanted to frame it a little bit more, if that's okay. Is so what we're talking about, the bigger frame here is the idea that the mind and body are connected. And that so much of psychotherapy and healing that has gone on up until maybe about 30 to 40 years ago has been from the neck up, in the sense of head talk, speaking, contemplating, talking about emotion, but not having body expression. And so one of the things that energy psychology, or tapping, or EFT, or the originator, which is TFT, did is it took Chinese medicine meridians, which are lines of energy through the body, and instead of using needles and acupuncture, using pressure, gentle tapping, holding, or massaging of endpoints of meridians, mostly around the head, the torso, and the hands, and sometimes the legs. And that includes speaking or not. But there are complicated steps to follow. And I think that your main takeaway that I have from you is, when you are in deep trauma, you cannot do these things. You're lost. You need someone to come kind of grab you and bring you back to just present moment focus. You can't follow all these steps. And the part of the brain that's engaged with deep trauma is language doesn't get there. And so what you found is, what are the simplest steps that are the most effective in the shortest time to reach someone who is in the pit of trauma. And the havening is so beautiful, just the simplest. For those of you who are listening and not watching, crossing your arms at your outside of your shoulders, just like you're going to give yourself a hug, and gently moving down to the elbow. This is just being soothed and petted. And that alone says, I am safe, I am calm, I can be here right now in my body, at least a little bit. So I don't mean to pivot away from where you're going, but I don't want to lose people. So is that a fair summary of what you've said?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would add that actually what we found working with people in refugee camps coming from the wars in Syria, 2015, there were a lot of refugees passing through Greece into Europe. And so we went down there and collaborated with a health clinic with volunteer doctors to help them with anxiety and panic. And what we found was that havening in that context is actually best applied pretty firmly, not a caress and not a massage, because it's actually a stimulation of the fascia, it seems. I mean, these are all hypotheses, but it seems that it's that. And when we do hug someone, or when we do caress someone on the shoulder, it's actually because that's how we calm down. So I believe hugs and caresses are done by humans the way they are because those points of the body calm down more than other points. And so the havening technique, actually for panic attack on the shoulders, we actually explain it like it's not a caress, it's not a massage, you're just stimulating fascia, and it can be done even outside the clothes.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can have a jacket on and it'll still work. And the funny thing is, because we're always looking for research that, you can never say research proves anything, but you can say that research supports in some way.
Yeah.
And it's not that we find it's vital to get research on what we do, because we have 15 years and thousands of cases. We reached 300,000 people in 45 countries. We know this works.
Wow.
But we're exploring why and how always.
Yeah, great. Oh, so thank you so much for pointing out that difference between the gentle stroking, which is what I tend to do with psychotherapy clients when I'm deep in it with someone. But if someone's in a deep, in the moment trauma, then to have that more vigorous, strong, you know, it's like it wakes up the body and it brings you, because it's too easy to dismiss a gentle touch. So thank you for pointing that out. So you just gently mentioned the scale and scope of the work that you've been doing, but I wish that you would spend a little bit more time with just talking about the series of this types of communities that have been impacted positively by the work that you've done. Not to brag, but to give people an idea of the scope.
Yeah, we try not to brag about anything. We don't even believe that it's us doing anything. We're just showing people how they can do things. And we always say that if someone actually says they feel better after a session, we congratulate them so that they own the healing part of it for autonomy. Because the thing with first aid is we show it to them, but we also show them how they can do it. So if you want to help someone who has conditioning like trauma and anxiety and phobias and multiple things that have been happening, there's just any number of triggers, and people have no idea what they are when you're in a therapy room with them. But if you have someone in a refugee camp and they come and they say, I get panic attacks and I'm not sure why, you help them to lower their anxiety or feel safe inside with one of those attacks. And then you tell them, next time you have one, start doing this with your hands, because hand havening is easier than tapping on yourself. Start doing this with your hands and notice how the palms of your hands are feeling before it accelerates too much, and then you won't have the attack. Because now you've added an emotional safety belt.
Yeah, sorry for those who are listening and not seeing your hands. Can you describe what it is that you're doing?
Hand. So imagine that you're going to pray. So you put your hands together like a child would do at the bedside. And then you move your hands in a circular motion so that your palms are creating a slight friction with each other. As if you have a glass pearl, then you're rolling it, but you don't want to crush it and you don't want to drop it.
Mhm. And that simple movement, which is easy to memorize and is free and always accessible, what is it actually doing as you do this simple movement?
Well, again, we can only hypothesize, but there is loads of studies that show that rhythmic bilateral stimulation, meaning you're using both sides of your body, which means you're activating both halves of your brain. When you do this on a part of the body that has many nerve endings, like your hands, the palms of your hands can read, you can read blind writing at the speed of reading with your eyes. It's incredible how many nerves you have in the hands. And so basically, if you imagine somebody directing an orchestra, standing in front of the orchestra, moving the hands in a kind of 8, that's the kind of pattern that appears if you do a QEEG of the brain when you're doing this with your hands.
Oh.
And
Figure eights or harmonizing energies.
yes, but you're also stimulating both halves of the brain,
Uh-huh.
creating coherence, creating safety. Rhythm creates safety, dance creates safety,
Yeah.
music creates safety. And so I think we're pushing a lot of buttons in the nervous system at the same time.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm learning as I listen too, so thank you. And you're so clear in your explanations and making this so accessible. So can you speak a little bit about the work that you're doing with people who have been or are incarcerated?
Yeah. We just did a conference, a symposium rather, in Rwanda this year, in February. And a symposium means that you're getting together people who have been working in different parts of societal work and humanitarian work, and you're trying to find out what is the best practice, what are we learning, what are the gaps of knowledge that we need to fill for people to be able to do this better. So it's quite exciting to do that. And we had people who were working with teenage mothers in Uganda. We had people who had with our F.A.S.T toolkit, first aid stress and trauma. Just side note, we started with TTT, the tapping, trauma tapping technique. We made it a first aid. We added havening. We could now do the double bind of offering two things to compare, which means we converted the name of what we're doing from TTT to first aid stress and trauma, acronym F.A.S.T.
Got it.
Because that way we're focusing on a toolbox and a framing and a mindset and an approach rather than why do I tap this point and not that one?
Great. And so you were using that at this symposium, or you're
Right. So we had
teaching?
teenage mothers, which is the beginning of life. We had kids on their way into criminality, which is when the village has failed someone quite a lot. Then we had the kids that actually come to the prison or to jail, the Chesterfield County Jail, Guys March in England, and the prisons, multiple prisons we've been working for many years in Rwanda. And basically, we also looked at what happens when you get out of prison and you want to reintegrate into society. Or some are in prison because of drugs and drug abuse, some are there because of criminality, some for both. Because if you're doing drugs, you need to do crime to sustain the habit, and you're breaking the law anyhow because you're doing drugs.
Yeah.
So what we found was this is a full circle where we're looking, at society from birth to grave with the people that the village has failed. Because every single person in prison is a child that the village didn't support. And it's that easy. So they're not supposed to be punished. They're supposed to be helped. And when they get out, they need to find a job. And that's what Homeboy does in LA. Nothing stops a bullet like a job. It's that easy. And so the secret sauce that we found in all of these approaches in Uganda, in Rwanda, in Congo, in England, in the US, the secret sauce is love. Not love alone. That's not going to fix it. Because in that case, every single parent with a troubled kid would succeed. Because usually it's a mother and she's loving her kid to death, but it's not enough.
Yeah.
So
Directed love.
well, you need love, But you also need the village. You need a
Hmm.
community that creates meaning. You need a place where you can do something that is applauded or meaningful so that you're not tempted to, because nobody sees that you're hurting. You're looking for drugs to ease the hurt. Nobody sees that you have no connection. So you're looking for a tribe. And a criminal gang is an easy tribe to get into and a very hard tribe to get out of.
Yes. Yes. Beautiful. And so you're reaching people.
Well, we found the best practices. One thing was, wow, we could really see this whole road or loop of being born into a life of crime or addiction and having a hard time getting out of it.
Hmm.
And we could also see and know and state how actually the FAST toolkit with the havening and trauma tapping and breathing, but also the idea that we never assume anything. We have a manifesto that says, don't assume anything. Take your shoes off and listen. Somebody was abused sexually multiple times. It happens to be a woman. Don't assume that she doesn't want to be tapped or havened just because it happens to be a man offering that.
Hmm.
That's an unclean assumption. You
Hmm.
asked, would you like me to show you this?
Yeah.
And a lot of times, well, actually up to now, I think with thousands of people, it's only happened once. And it wasn't because it was a man and she was a woman. It was because she just didn't like anybody or anything touching her.
Hmm. And there's an assumption that someone who's been multiply sexually abused is female. So there's that too. So yeah, this is great. And to have the community, if the community can understand their responsibility to, first of all, recognizing that they are connected to the individual failure, so to speak, failure, or misattunement, or yeah. Hmm. And so to see that there is a connection from the person to the group, what is the group's responsibility? And then how do you pivot and relearn to be able to bring people back in to their rightful home?
Yeah.
That's not easy, but it's important and necessary.
I would say, I would actually say it is easy. It's as easy as exercise. Everybody, wants a pill. I mean, 2,000 years ago, the early doctors that wrote in the writings of Aristotle and Euclides and Plato and Socrates, one of them wrote, everybody wants the pill. Everybody wants the medicine. Nobody wants to exercise and stop drinking and eating too much. The answer is simple, if you look at people as people and you're prepared to help them even if you don't know them, then you're actually doing exactly what the village needs to do.
So it starts with each of us.
Yes, and the funny thing is, I believe it starts at the kitchen table in the family. Is there bigotry and racial slurs and misogyny, or are you taught to stand up for yourself and for others? I mean, there's the Hero Project, which was done because I don't remember if it was Zimbardo. He was looking at why do people do heroic things that are selfless
Hmm.
and at risk of their life.
Hmm.
And he found that people who did it without thinking because they had thought about it in advance. They were prepared. There was a Chicago school project where there were a lot of shootings and gang actions in the streets.
Hmm.
They did a community program where they actually just taught negotiation and consequence thinking. And they didn't target the kids that were in the criminal edge of the field. They target all the kids.
Hmm.
And what happened in the shootings went down by 50%.
Wow.
So it's not that complicated.
Hmm.
But it's complicated when politicians think that you need harsher punishment, more police, and more prisons. Because we know through loads of statistics over many, many years, that's not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. It's human to human interaction in a safe environment with specific skills. Because as you said, these things need to be rehearsed ahead of time. 'Cause people go
Mhm.
into shock, and
Yeah.
also they respond too late. when the volcano was already erupting. You mentioned the prisons, and I was able to get some beautiful information of work you had done in the Chesterfield County Jail, and I wrote a blog about it, so thank you. The beautiful photo that your wife had taken of the work that you've done there. So would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a beautiful use of energy psychology, and that shows how one person makes the difference. In this case, two people. So Carl Leonard, who's the sheriff there, he worked as a policeman in the streets for 30 years. And when he quit, somebody said, you should apply to be sheriff at the county jail. I was like, I'm not sure, because he saw that, he took people, brought them to jail, and then they came back into the street. So something just wasn't working. And when he walks into the jail, he finds people in solitary cells on the floor, just in fetus position. And he went in and asked, what's happening here? Mm-hmm. And this is withdrawal from heroin, because there is an opioid epidemic in the States due to opioids as painkillers, which is a known fact and a very sad thing. Yeah. And so he was like, something needs to be different. So he talked to the inmates and he said, those of you who are struggling to get out of addiction, what would the ideal program look like inside this jail if you ran it? And then he let them run it. Now so he breaks every single rule there is, right? And then, sad story turns golden lining. Carrie Rhodes, who is a therapist in the community, a psychologist, she's working there, and her son, great kid, goes well, plays tennis, gets painkillers, and gets hooked, and dies of an overdose. Horrible thing, the worst thing you can imagine as a parent. I don't think there's anything worse. So she chooses to do something, and she had taken a training with us in the F.A.S.T, first aid, trauma tapping, and she was an EFT practitioner before that. And so she knew, she could tell the differences, and she found this tool to be simpler and safer to give to anyone rather than be a practitioner or a therapist. She knocked on the door of the prison and told Carl, I want to volunteer. I want to help you out here because I think I can add something to your program. Mm-hmm. And he saw the results and he was like, you know what? You have a job. She's now leading the mental health department in that jail. And so we hooked up like 3 years ago at the tail of the pandemic, and we started doing trainings. I mean, they get the whole male pod, 100 guys together, maybe 60 women. And we had them all on screen doing remote Zoom trainings with them. We started certifying them because we believe in empowerment. Imagine you're in jail and you're thinking, time is passing through my hands like sand. What am I going to do? And all of a sudden you're certified in a healing modality.
Yeah.
Your name is on a website from an organization that does humanitarian work. So staff and inmates, I think it's 160 or something, that are certified and listed. Mm-hmm. And so they're now able to regulate emotion. And then the program has, of course, loads of other things that are necessary because it's psychoeducation. It's lots of different things. And the secret sauce in Chesterfield is that you get your village, because even when you're out of the jail, you're not out of the program. You're still an alumni. Now you are someone who can teach others, and which means there are people on the outside who will help you without knowing who you are. And you can, any time of the day or night, if you feel shaky and you're not sure you're gonna be able to abstain or just get a grip, this jail allows you to go there, knock on the door, and the guard will let you in to a solitary cell any time of day. And you can stay a couple of days and then get back out.
That's incredible.
That's beyond.
Yeah. It's a sanctuary.
It is. I mean, in many ways it is, because you can't run that program without a jail, almost. Because in the jail, you can control traffic of drugs, you can control safety, you can control who gets in and out and who knocks on the door, and you can sleep, behind closed door that nobody's going to open, not even you. So there is an advantage to that sanctuary, and I think it's the most beautiful application of criminal care.
It's incredible. And it would be amazing if it started to spread and it wasn't just one example.
Yes, there's that.
Well, who knows who's listening to this podcast?
And again, it's not the least complicated. All it needs is someone prepared to lose their job to do the right thing.
I love it. Spoken like a true activist.
Yeah.
Well, we're recording this in April of 2025, and there are a lot of people losing their job, and not necessarily because they want to, but they might be listening at some point or watching this or know someone who is ready to take a different step. And so I'm so grateful that you are sharing these gems with other people. And we're coming to the end of our time together, and I'm wondering if there's anything else you'd like to share before we say goodbye for today.
Yeah. When you see that kid standing alone or that person sleeping on the street, asking for $1, and you're thinking they're probably going to buy a beer, let them buy that beer. Because you giving them something and looking at them and smiling and not judging them could be the difference of life and death.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're replacing the village. When you see that single mom, or, because usually it is single moms, or you see that, person who just doesn't seem to feel well at work, it'll take you 30 seconds to just show compassion. When you see a person with a panic attack, we have so much free material. Our book is free. It's in 4 languages now. We have a field manual that's electronic that you can list under the video, and people click on it and it says, how do you resolve a panic attack for someone else? How do you get stable inside of yourself? How can you actually do first aid stress and trauma? There are free trainings that we offer, and there's also a site, disasterready.org, which is free, in which you can take our course. It's 30 minutes. And I just say, if you ever thought about learning mouth to mouth in case someone has a drowning incident, it will save a life. And it doesn't feel great to know you could have learned it, but you didn't.
Yeah.
It's the same with this. It's emotional first aid. Learn it. It's free. Do it. Pass it on. And I want to say also great kudos to you, because when you write that newsletter and when you do this interview, if we did this, we'd be troubadours without an audience. When you spread it to other people, it becomes music and a campfire.
Yes. And a community dance.
Exactly. Don't forget the community dance. Dance like nobody sees you, and you would be ashamed if you did.
Oh, thank you so much. This has just been delightful, as I knew it would be. And I just support you in the way you support others. And so lighting that one candle that lights so many. Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining today. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you for joining us for today's podcast. If you want to learn more, you can visit my website for podcast and resources at hopshealingtips.com. You can also like, share, and subscribe to this channel. This podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only and is not providing healthcare advice. Please seek guidance from your professional healthcare team should you need assistance.